Hello, everybody. I'm Dustin Benzel, and welcome to Generation 2, my reflections of Generation 2. Now, in terms of the overall series, I wouldn't say that Generation 2 was the worst, but the only thing that had Generation 2 going for it was the league and a lot of the gym battles. But for the most part, the Johto region, the second generation, wasn't exactly one of the good ones. It'd probably be my second worst, after Unova. Unova, I could say, was probably the worst. Unova had a lot of disappointment, and so I would say that Johto is probably just above Unova, simply just for the league battles and the gyms. So let's jump right into it. Let's talk about Brock and Misty. Now, second generation was notable for one particular aspect. It was the generation that ended Misty. Misty got shot and killed, and there was a funeral. No, just kidding. No, I don't mean like that, but it was the generation that had Misty thinking about what she wanted to do, and then she decided that she was just going to become a gym leader. Now, yeah, I realize this is so awkward doing the gyms in reverse, but I felt like it made sense. To me, it would have felt weird going in normal, kind of like to go backwards, so that way when we get one, we could bounce back up to where we are now. So anyway, what is second generation? Well, second generation was an interesting experiment, I will say, but it really does fail a lot. For one thing, Ash's Johto Pokemon is the least developed of all of Ash's Pokemon. Yes, people, even his Unova team got a little bit more development than his Johto team. So what did Ash have? Well, before we get into that, let's talk about Misty and Brock real quick. Misty and Brock really didn't do much. They had Pokemon, but they didn't do much. What happened was Brock ended up with a Crobat. He ended up with a Fortress after evolving it from Pineco. He had a full team at this point. This is the series where Brock gave up Vulpix, returned it to Suzy. He still had like Geodude and Onix, I can't think of if he had any other Pokemon, but his main new Pokemon within Johto series was basically Fortress and Crobat. So let's go to Misty. What about Misty? Well, the only team changes she had throughout the whole entire generation was that she got her Poliwag that she got in Orange Islands evolved into Poliwhirl and then Politoed, and then she caught a Corsola. I'm pretty sure that's it. Let me put it this way. It is sad to see that Ash's traveling companions get more evolution than he does. Golbat evolved twice, Pineco evolved once, Misty's Poliwag evolved twice, and then she also got a Corsola. So it was really sad to see that Ash's team did not change very much, outside of a whole bunch of dumpage. So let's get into it. What about Ash? Ash, when he entered the Johto region, he had Pikachu, he had Charizard, he had Bulbasaur, he had Squirtle, and he had... No, I'm pretty sure that's it. That's right, he only had 4 Pokemon: Heracross, Chikorita... Yeah, he only had the 4 Pokemon, Pikachu, and the 3 starters. So then Ash's first capture was pretty interesting. It was a Heracross. Now, looking back at it, Heracross was always a weird capture, because it kind of came out of nowhere. You would not have expected it. Looking at first generation, and looking at after second generation, you will come to the conclusion that Heracross was a very unusual capture, because Heracross is a fairly big Pokemon too, and it was Ash's first Johto Pokemon that was caught within the Johto region. Then we get into some releases of Charizard going to Charcific Valley. We have Squirtle going back to the Squirtle Squad, and then we have Bulbasaur, which literally did nothing throughout the whole entire Johto region. It was the one that lasted the longest. And Bulbasaur was just transferred to Professor Oak. In favor of what, you might add? Well, after Heracross was Chikorita, then Cyndaquil, then Totodile, then Noctowl, then Phanpy. Now, that's pretty much it. I guess I could discuss the Pokemon themselves. See, Heracross was a really cool Pokemon. It was really nice to see a giant bug fighting Pokemon that Ash had in the beginning. You know, it's a shame that Heracross didn't exactly get all that much. Then Chikorita. Chikorita was a cool Pokemon. It had a very nice moments with Ash. And then we have Cyndaquil. Cyndaquil was okay. It had that fire starting issue, you know. It was that, you know, then we see Ash actually training Cyndaquil at some point. Then we have Totodile, which was completely underutilized completely throughout the whole entire region. And then we have Chikorita evolving, basically. After, of course, Ash caught Noctowl. Heracross is permanently oaked because Professor Oak wants to study Heracross. And then a long time later, Ash gets his egg from a Pokemon race where Gary was introduced. And then the egg hatched into Phanpy. Now, the reason why Johto is probably one of my least favorite generations outside of the gym battles as well as the league is because Ash's Pokemon did not develop. Throughout the entire generation, the only thing we ever got was Pikachu being used in every gym of that generation. Then we had Chikorita evolving into Bayleaf, the only evolution that Ash had during that entire thing. And then we had Cyndaquil, which was the MVP. It was Ash's Chimchar in the Johto region because Cyndaquil did amazing. It beat Bugsy's Scyther, Morty's Ghastly, I believe, or even Haunter. I'm not really sure on that. Then there was Jasmine's Steelix. Then there was Price's Dugong. You know, pretty amazing Pokemon Cyndaquil was. Shame it didn't evolve until the Sinnoh League. So after a couple of generations, that's when it evolved. You know, so yeah, that was a little disappointing. You know, I can understand there was some reasons for why Ash's team was lacking, but still. Johto was a straight up league. It started at the end of first generation and it went all the way through until third generation. The least they could have done is develop Ash's Pokemon a little bit more instead of having filler after filler after filler episode of complete irrelevance and nothing benefiting Ash's Pokemon at all. So that's pretty much it. This is the one where Gary, well, we'll get to that in a moment. So, let me see here. Alright, let's talk about the gym battles. Faulkner was interesting because what Faulkner was an interesting choice because Faulkner had Pidgeot, Dodrio, and Hoot Hoot. And at this particular moment, Ash had Charizard, Chikorita, and Pikachu. And that's what he used. And the thing about it is I'm a little confused as to why Faulkner was criticizing Ash because he used Chikorita against Hoot Hoot, but even though Chikorita lost, whatever, you know. So yeah, Faulkner was pretty decent because we had a Pidgeot versus Charizard battle. And the bad thing is that it mentioned Ash's own Pidgeot, and it's a shame that Pidgeot isn't at Professor Oak's right now, chilling with the gang. I don't know why they did that. Pidgeotto could have evolved into Pidgeot. Ash could have used Pidgeot, and that would have been so cool. But no, what we get is Pidgeotto evolving into Pidgeot, and then Ash releases Pidgeot just because, for the hell of it. Whatever. So that was Faulkner. Then we run into Bugsy, where it was Cyndaquil and Chikorita and Pikachu, I think. Versus, all I remember, versus Spinarak, Metapod, as well as Scyther. I'm not really sure what the matchups were in that, but I do know that I think Chikorita beat something, as well as Cyndaquil knocking out Scyther. So then we get in a third gym. Now, this one was the cheapest. It was acceptable except the overpowered Miltank. What happened was, it was against Whitney. Whitney had Nidorina. Whitney also had Clefairy, I believe. And then she had Miltank. And what happened was, I think Cyndaquil took out Nidorina and Clefairy, or something of that nature. And then it was just basically Totodile, Cyndaquil, and Pikachu versus Miltank. So yeah, that was a little disappointing to see. Especially of that team effort. I mean, it made sense, and I wonder if they were just making a joke. Because if you know anything about the games, at least within the second generation, and Gold, Silver, and even Crystal, I believe that everyone criticized Whitney's Miltank for being so strong, especially with that rollout attack, So, yeah, there is that. Miltank was probably pretty tier during that gym, and a lot of people had problems with it, and I personally never did, but maybe that's because I grinded my Pokemon levels at the particular point. I would think I would have something like Togepi, maybe even Haunter, and I think at that particular moment, but I'm not really sure. So anyway, that's Whitney. Then we get into Morty. I like Morty for the simple fact of Noctowl. Now, I didn't address this when I talked about Noctowl, but Noctowl is very unique to Ash's team because it is a shiny coloration. It's an alternate colored Pokemon, a shiny, so it looks really nice. The only thing that's wrong about it is that it's so small, basically. Noctowl in the games are average height. I mean, just look at the random person next to you. If they're within 5 feet or something, that's probably as big as Noctowl is. Noctowl within the anime, however, at least Ash's Noctowl, is probably more probably a foot, probably. Not good portrayal of Noctowl in general. So then we get into Morty. Now, like I said, Morty was cool because of Noctowl, and it used psychic types, and this goes forward and it foreshadows Noctowl's usage in the Sinnoh League, with it mostly being special. Now, if I'm not mistaken, Noctowl's attack stat is higher than its special attack stat, but it can learn a whole bunch of specially ranged moves, so there's that to consider. Cyndaquil also does beat a Pokemon, and I think Pikachu gets knocked out and doesn't do anything. Then we run into Chuck, which is the 5th gym leader, if I'm not mistaken. And it was basically Bayleaf and Pikachu versus Chuck's Machoke and Poliwrath. Now, I'm not really sure the circumstances. I'm not sure if Pikachu beat Poliwrath or if Bayleaf beat both of them, but I do believe that battle was instrumental to Bayleaf, and that it showed great skill. At least in comparison to the other lack of gyms that Chikorita / Bayleaf were in. So then there's that. Then we get into Jasmine. Jasmine was really cool because it was Cyndaquil versus Steelix. And that was just so nice to see Steelix losing to Cyndaquil. So then there's that. And then there's the whole Price thing. Now, here's why I didn't like Price very well. The thing is, even though Pikachu was in every gym battle during that league, or during that time frame, Pikachu didn't get a lot. So I can understand why Pikachu may have gotten this, because I don't think prior to that it got anything, actually. First gym was Charizard, second gym was Cyndaquil, third gym... Pikachu did get Miltank, I'll give you that. But I can understand that. But the problem that I had with it is how it ended. You know, it was Piloswine versus Pikachu. Piloswine being immune to Pikachu's attack, and then it ended up with Price throwing in the towel or whatever. That was a little ridiculous, because it's like no Pokemon wanted to give up. Although I'm pretty sure Piloswine could have easily survived, and why Price decided to do that, I don't know. The thing is, I think it would have been made a little bit more sense if Totodile was in that battle. Here's why. Ice types, if I'm not mistaken, only resist other ice type moves. So a ground water type would have been weak against water types, and that would have made sense. That way Pikachu probably could have taken out Dugong, and Totodile could have at least gotten Piloswine. But whatever happened, happened. Now, let's get into the final gym. Like I said, this is probably just going to be all in one episode, because it really is that short of, there's like really nothing to discuss. You know, there really isn't that much to discuss. So then we get into Claire. Claire, the dragon type gym leader. What did she have? She had Kingdra. She had Dragonair. She had Gyarados. Now, this one's pretty interesting, because in the very beginning, in the first matchup with Claire versus Ash, we had Noctowl being used, and it would have been nice to see Noctowl knocking out that Kingdra, I believe it was, before losing, or before being interrupted, or something like that. Sorry. Something of that nature, where Noctowl would beat Kingdra, or at least it would have just knocked it out. Noctowl would have gotten some yay, but before the referee could say that Kingdra is knocked out, that's when Team Rocket could have interrupted with their whole Dragonite shrine plot thing going on there. So then there was a rematch. Oh, and during this time, when Claire was first introduced, that was when she had Dratini, and I believe it evolved into Dragonair. So then we have a rematch, and this is when Charizard comes back, and then in the rematch, because the first battle was interrupted, we had Ash with Snorlax, Pikachu, and Charizard. Snorlax beat Kingdra, Pikachu took out Gyarados, and we had Charizard taking out Dragonair. Bada bing, bada boom, right? Sorry. Woo! So that's pretty much it. So let's get into the league, and then we'll wrap this up real quick. The league introduced Harrison, and that was pretty much it. I like the gym battles because even though Macy and Jackson, I believe that's one of his names. He has like two names. I think Jackson is one of them. Vincent or Jackson, something like that. And then Macy, you know, they were pretty interesting characters, but they really didn't do much. What we focus more on is the fact that Ash actually beats Gary within the Silver Conference. That was a pretty nice battle. But before we get in there are some blink and miss moments that I have to address. I do like how Fampy took out I think it was a Machoke in one of those early qualifying preliminary rounds, blink and miss shots that you see. It's also where Cyndaquil actually gets a win. It gets in a blink and miss Executor, which doesn't say very much, considering later on Cyndaquil loses to a Magneton. All in favor of Charizard replacing Cyndaquil during the league, which wouldn't have been so bad if Cyndaquil actually did get at least something. I guess the blink and miss Executor is just going to have to be enough. Anyway, Ash versus Gary is when the rivalry comes to a head, when they finally resolve their differences. Gary's not an arrogant jerk anymore, and he has a different career path in mind. So the battle was, Gary had, let me see, he had Magmar, he had Nidoqueen, he had Golem, Scizor, Blastoise, and then he had, let me see, Magmar, lost Heracross, Snorlax beat Nidoqueen, as well as Arcanine. So he had he had Magmar, he had Arcanine, he had Nidoqueen, he had Scizor, he had Golem, and he had Blastoise. What did Ash use? Surprisingly enough, this is the only full battle that Ash has not ever used Pikachu. That's good to know, because what did Ash use? He used Heracross, Charizard, Muk, Tauros, Bayleaf, and Snorlax. Whew, that was a hard one. Now, this was a little disappointing for Muk because it didn't do anything, and for Tauros for not doing anything, which is unfortunate. So what we have here is we have Heracross taking out Gary's Magmar. Heracross loses to Blastoise, I believe. Then we have Snorlax taking out Arcanine, as well as Nidoqueen. Nidoqueen, Arcanine, Magmar. Then Charizard took out Scizor and Golem, as well as Blastoise. I really liked, the best of that battle was, of course, Charizard versus Blastoise, which is really, really nice. It was really clever of Ash to use Charizard to get really close so Blastoise couldn't use its turrets to use Hydro Pump, I like the whole heating up the rocks, and I really enjoyed that battle. That was really epic, and that final seismic toss that ended with Ash winning was really nice. So that was that battle. Then we have Harrison. Okay, so Ash had Pikachu, Charizard, Totodile, Noctowl, Bayleaf, and Snorlax. And Harrison had Steelix, Sneasel, Blaziken, Kecleon, Hypno, and Houndoom. Pikachu beats Kecleon, loses to Sneasel. Totodile takes out Sneasel, then loses to Hypno. Hypno loses to Snorlax, then it's a break. It's Steelix versus Noctowl. Noctowl loses, Snorlax then beats Steelix, so that's 4. Then Houndoom beats Snorlax, then it's Bayleaf. Bayleaf wins Houndoom. Then we have Blaziken knocking out Bayleaf without any problem. Then it's Blaziken versus Charizard, and Blaziken manages to come out on top. Woo! Sorry about that. Woo! Now, I want to address this real quick, since it's really notable. The thing is, I don't know if I said this before, but, anime was a weird time for me. I wasn't caught up with everything because I didn't have cable, so I didn't know what was going on. At this particular point, the dubs were like a year from the raw, because 4Kids wouldn't get off their butts and start dubbing episodes. And, well, the problem was that when 3rd generation came out, Pokemon, I was a little upset. At that particular time, I was upset. And the reason why is because at that time, I believed that Pokemon had to show up in the anime first before I could accept it in game terms. I don't know, it was just a stray thought that I realized was really stupid at that time. But there was this 3rd generation, there was all these brand new Pokemon within 3rd generation, and I was horribly disappointed for the simple fact that they weren't Pokemon that I've seen within the anime. I don't remember what I remember seeing during that time. All I remember is that 3rd generation I had a problem with because I didn't see these Pokemon within the anime. Whatever, right? But I've gotten over that. But one thing I noticed is that Blaziken really stands out. And the thing is, I didn't realize that it was such a prominent Pokemon within the actual second generation as a result of that league. So that explains why Blaziken got so much prominence. But, I dropped it in favor of Sceptile, actually, once Ash had Trico and Grovyle and stuff. Oh, the days of what it would have been like if Ash had his own Blaziken, but after Harrison, I can understand why. That covers everything else. If there was anything else that you wanted me to talk about, I can address it in future Pokemon episodes, but that's pretty much it. We get Gary having researching and Ash deciding to go to Hoenn region, and, then Ash completely dumps all of his Pokemon in favor of just Pikachu, and that's the start of Ash only using Pikachu within the generation and capturing Pokemon then. Third generation, so there we go. That's pretty much it. So, that covers this one. As you know, we're reaching up to the final reflections, and we're going to go into first generation, which is the first generation, and I may break it up into two parts, but what I'm going to focus on in that particular reflections is the fact that it is the first generation. There were some interesting things about the first generation anime, and I will discuss the Orange Islands as best as I can. I'll definitely discuss Lapras and Snorlax. I'll discuss the gyms. I'll discuss the introduction of the characters of Ash, Misty, and Brock. So it might be 2 episodes, it might be 1, and I'll say right now, definitely I would put first generation above second generation as well as fifth generation. So that's pretty much my reflections of second generation. Thank you for watching. With me running out of reflections of the past generations, you're going to have to give me some more ideas of what to discuss possibly. So, yeah, I'm not as energetic right now, but I'm extremely tired for some odd reason. So, I will see you in the next video, and goodbye.